Welcome to Automation Unpacked, Tales from the Warehouse, where we delve into the complex world of industrial automation. With insightful discussions and real-life stories from industry experts, our goal is to support, guide, and inspire you on your own journey to automate warehouse facilities. Hi, Jay. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So this is Jay Blinderman. He's the VP of Partner Success at SVT Robotics. And we're really excited to have you come talk to us today and talk a little bit more about the SoftBot platform, but specifically the problems that we're helping solve in the market and how we leverage the partner network to ultimately enable end users to automate their facilities more effectively and far more quickly than the traditional methods today. So I'd love to start out by talking a little bit about your background. I know you have quite a history within this industry in supply chain as well and software in general. So I'd love for you to give a little bit of background, give some color to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Been in the industry for a while. Sometimes I describe myself as like the original farm to table person because my family owned and operated supermarkets. And so being in part of my dad's operation, you had to learn every part of the operation from, ranch hand, which is easy to do being here in Texas. Worked on a neighbor's poultry farm as well, or poultry plant, and did some stuff in the crops as well. Clearly, I was not good at any of those jobs because I didn't go on to do any of them, but went on to spend probably 10 plus years in retail grocery, and then another 10 plus years in consumer packaged goods, working with a couple of major, global brands. And then somewhere along the way, I segued into technology, but it was still all supply chain related. So early in my technology career, I worked with handheld mobile devices and wireless WAN and wireless LAN, and then eventually got into voice systems, and somewhere along the mix did enterprise software, and then jumped back in with SVT in the role that I'm in today.
Here we are. So let's talk a little bit about what problems customers come to SVT with, and perhaps how that involves partners and what you're hearing from partners in terms of the problems that they're trying to solve and how we come into that.
Yeah, in our industry, I think customers come to SVT with a lot of challenges that they're looking to solve. I think part of the challenge in and of itself is that they may not know where to start. So they come to SVT utilizing our tool set to kind of understand, what is available, what's out there that we could deploy that help solve our problem, whether it's a picking technology or IoT or sensing technology, something to help solve whatever problem they're having inside their warehouse or manufacturing facility. So they're just out looking for, who can meet the requirements that they're looking to fill to solve their problem.
And to tease that out a little bit more, what are some of the common, like with some specificity, problems that folks are seeing in their warehouse that they're like, all right, we need to go shopping for some sort of automation solution to help rectify this?
Yeah, our experience and even my past life experiences have been that picking tends to be the number one use case, order fulfillment. It's been modernized somewhat, or the problem set's changed because of e-com. Back to my horse and carriage days, it was always bricks and mortar, and that was the only form of anything out there or manufacturing to distribution than to bricks and mortar. But today there's a more, direct relationship with end users. And so end users like myself, like yourself, are probably impatient. I go order something now and I want it on my doorstep tomorrow. So there's pressures for people to do those order fulfillment, picking, et cetera, faster. But there's also an accuracy element that's as important now as it's ever been. Historically, Food Market Institute did a study many, many years ago on what's the cost of an error for a grocer. So even if you mispick a $10 case of pinto beans, it would cost you $100 to replace and return that case of pinto beans back to the manufacturer. Well, now there's not $10 cases of pinto beans, And now the items that are going across e-commerce are much more costly. Their watches, their electronics, there's computers, any one of the cell phone devices we use. So those errors become more and more costly. So back to the whole picking solution, people need to not only pick faster, but they need to pick more accurately.
Absolutely. And could we talk a little bit about, I mean, I know in my background, I'm new to the supply chain, but not new to B2B, software. And in my experience, I found that you have folks in usually leadership roles that go out and they get really enamored with some cool technology that promises the moon and stars above. And then you have the team that's sort of tasked with implementing it and driving ROI. And
Mhm.
from my time so far in this industry, it feels like there's some similarities. So can you speak to sort of what that process looks like from a buying perspective and what you see happen sort of post purchase?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's a lot of stakeholders involved in deploying automation. And to your exact point, someone may go to a trade show or an industry event, or they listen to a podcast like this and they see some cool whiz bang technology and they got to have it. Um, and that pushes down through the organization. And you're going to have a set of people focused on operations, and you're likely to have a set of people involved in IT in support of the organization as well as the operations group. And their day job isn't deploying technology. Their day job is to keep the trains running, efficiently and effectively, and also keep bad actors out of their system. And so that's where they focus a lot of their time. So deploying technology for them is probably a distraction at the least, probably not something that's welcome. So I think a key part in getting everyone to adopt anything, this isn't just supply chain, but it's any new process, is getting everyone in the organization to understand what problem are we solving, what are the benefits of solving this problem, and who are the companies or what's the company that's best equipped to help us solve it with us taking on the least amount of risk and having the greatest opportunity for success.
Yep. And I think sort of on the other end of that, if I'm sort of going to the extreme of someone going out and buying something and maybe not thinking about through the deployment and integration, sort of on the other side of that, I think that as much as I think there's all these pressures, right, to change, to innovate, et cetera. And to your point, people have a day job, right? So it's very easy to kind of put that off or be in this sort of perpetual search for the perfect solution because and feel free to to jump in because I know I'm sure you have some stories around this, but a lot of these decisions are massive financial investments, not only in resources, but just like in terms of dollars and can make and break careers. And so how do you shift from, that search of perfection and how does that sort of play into the solution you choose, right? Because I'm assuming you're going to want something that's can um like lower risk but also adapt, right?
Yeah, well, for starters, I don't think there's ever going to be perfection. So that'd be a nice to have, but not realistic. I think a realistic approach is you know, when you think about your problem set, what impacts your cash register the most? What impacts the company's bottom line the most? And I'll go back to what I mentioned earlier, which is order fulfillment or picking is normally the area that is going to have the greatest impact. I think the challenge has always been in the industry and will continue to be deciding what's going to deliver a return on investment and then what's a reasonable ROI for you. Is that 6 months or 12 months or 18 months or 24? But when you approach it from that perspective, then you can set some goals for your organization to understand, what targets do you want to hit and when so that the organization gets, good input and understanding around the decision they made. You can always iterate, you can always add more integration. So, someone who's doing manual processes today has a lot of challenges: speed, accuracy, the personnel to do that work. So, anyone doing any kind of manual operation, I'm sure they're probably in their comfort zone while they're still uncomfortable because things may not be going well. But if they start with one automation, see how it works. They can always add a second one 6 months down the road, a third one 6 months after that. But you got to find a place to start moving forward. Otherwise, you'll never reach that goal for the organization of speed and accuracy.
Right. And specifically within this industry, when you see projects deploying successfully and yeah, these automation sort of like initiatives going pretty well, all things considered. And we think about those initial stages of vetting technologies and that whole buying process. Who are the key players that need to be involved at the onset to ensure that successful sort of deployment or long term success?
Yeah, so it's a great question. There's a lot of stakeholders involved in these buying decisions, and I think the buildings haven't gotten any smaller. So my experience has been, even when you're talking to a VP or a director or a manager of a facility, I think it's also key to do a walkthrough with them along with some of the people who are actually tasked being responsible for executing those workflows. So a lot of people have a standard operating procedure. Not all of them understand that they're on standard or not. So it's great to find that out, because when you go to solve the problem and get stakeholder buy-in to how you're going to solve them, you want to know what's working well and what's not working well. Um, but I also think, besides the operational side of the business, it's super key to understand or get people involved from IT or the IT group supporting operations to help understand, what are some of the requirements they have in terms of hooking up to a system, what's in the building from a communication standpoint, what are some of the power requirements for the technology you might be deploying. There's a lot of things that hit on the operational side. And I think it's also key to get someone on the finance side of the business involved. So it's back to the ROI I spoke about earlier. What's going to be an investment versus something that we expect to get a payback on, and when do we expect to get that, and what questions can be answered for them to get them more comfortable around that, you know, this upfront spend is going to pay dividends in the end.
Great. Makes sense. And then, we're talking, I think, a little bit vaguely, but just to anchor this for anybody that's not familiar already, when we talk about, okay, you're going out, you're buying an automation solution, traditionally speaking, what does that integration process look like? What's sort of the standard in the industry today?
Yeah. So back to your buying cycle question, I think that's the other thing that I probably left out was there's a lot of great automation companies out there. They're going to help people understand what problem they need to solve. It's probably not common in their buying cycle process to fully go through all the steps for a customer on how you integrate that technology, because you want to get your deal across the line and get that moving forward. And that's something I think everybody needs to consider. And so that's another set of stakeholders that probably need to be brought in early to the process, is to understand, what effort's going to be involved to deploy the automations you're looking for, so that that doesn't stop you on the back end. Because the worst thing that can happen is you can go through all the T's and C's of a contract and even have robots on the ground, only to find out that, yeah, now we can't utilize them
Hmm.
because everyone wasn't bought in, or there's a piece of software we can't integrate to. So it's better off to have those discussions, as early as possible once you've narrowed down the scope of the technologies you intend to deploy.
And then what are those options in terms of how to actually integrate and deploy today? Like, what are yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a few options. So I'd like to look at it in a couple of buckets: the builders and the buyers. So there's companies that like to build or themselves, and that's clearly where you need to get the IT people involved and others in the organization to understand the effort involved. And then you've got another group of customers that tend to be buyers. They don't have any challenges whatsoever going to a third party outside of the organization to help them with what, in this case, would be integrating technology. And so, in both of those cases, oftentimes writing custom code is how those integrations occur. And that's actually one of the key problems that SVT Robotics helps solve is the elimination of the need of custom code. Custom code is great in a lot of cases, but it has some challenges. Tends to take quite a bit of time, can be very costly, oftentimes not well documented. And then it's inevitable that someone's business is going to change. They're going to have growth, or their business may scale up and down because it's a very seasonal business. And so if something was done purely using custom code, uh, more custom code's going to have to be written, more delays, more time, more cost. And that's the benefit of a system like ours, which is a truly agnostic system that scales up and down basically as the business requires changes to be made.
And just to clarify, like how are we fundamentally different from a system integrator because or systems integrator because they also have usually a tool set, right, and a platform that they might leverage to deploy or integrate solutions. So can you walk me through what that looks like or what the true differentiators are and do we work with them as well?
Yeah, so SVT is not a systems integrator. Probably early days, we kind of filled that gap because we were proving out that there was a need for what we do in the market. But systems integrators today are, users of our tool set. And so when I say we're not a systems integrator, let me go a little into detail. We're not interested in sizing and scoping someone's full problem set. We're not going to tell you how many robots you need. We're not going to tell you what the workflows are. We're not going to tell you, what the ROIs look like. And that's where systems integrators, as well as some of the other just pure play robotic partners we have, do a phenomenal job of that. But then they use our tool set to get those things implemented faster with less burden on the customer's IT department, less burden on their IT department as well, so that people can get value out of the decisions they're making a lot faster.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then can you talk, I know partners play a big role. Can you talk to me a little bit about uh why partners are key in our business and yeah, what are the ways that we engage with different OEMs?
Yeah, partners are key for a lot of reasons. Selfishly, from a pure business perspective, partners are what enable companies like us to scale because each partner has a set of people on their team, salespeople, pre-sales people, engineers, technology specialists, and they are focused on different aspects of the market. So once again, we're not a systems integrator. We could never understand the full market or meet all those requirements, and that's where partners come in. But partners are there to help solve end user customer problems. We fully recognize that. And then we're there to help them get those technologies deployed faster so that people can get value out of it faster. And our belief is that by working through partners, we're going to get our fair share of opportunities to help them solve those problems to, lead to great outcomes.
Okay. And then for people that might not be familiar with the SoftBot platform, can you speak to just like high level how it works and how we connect to different partners?
Yeah, high level how it works. We, have a cloud-based environment and we provide a platform and build these things that we call soft bots, which is not an end user, an OEM's API converted into this thing we call a soft bot that enables it to reside on our platform. And then anything else on the SVT platform can push data or receive data to formulate what would be a workflow. So, quick example, host system, a WMS or an ERP has a soft bot and it pushes out order information or picking information, if you will. And then there might be a picking robot on the other end of that equation, or picking robot's what's needed, whether it's a, pure play robot or an ASRS system. And it's listening for the information it needs, which might be location, quantity to fulfill the task at hand, which might be order fulfillment. And those two technologies reside on our platform without either one of them knowing the other one is there, nor do they care.
And so there's no changes needed to each respective OEM's API or
Yeah,
tech or anything, right?
yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. No, that's exactly right, Chloe. So I guess that's one of the other unique parts about SVT is that our approach to the market is that not only are we an agnostic provider, the other thing that makes us unique is we don't ask anybody to change what they're doing today from a technology perspective. So a WMS or a host system doesn't have to change its code for us to build a soft bot. And the same is true on the other side. The robotic company, the IoT sensor company, the conveyance company, the ASRS company, they provide us their API and we ingest it the way it is today.
Yeah, that seems like a benefit because then they're able to connect to like they extend their partner network by default, right? If they're connected to the Softbot platform and we're connected to a bunch of partners.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And so going back to the question you asked me earlier about, we're not a systems integrator, but we work with them. We absolutely, what you just brought up is a great example of why some SIs have chosen to work with us is that we're an extension of what they've already done. So they may already have built some custom integrations that they're super happy with and confident about, but there are thousands of technologies in the market today. I probably average 3 calls a week from net new technologies from all over the world that just simply had never heard of before. So if I were an SI, I don't know how I would ever keep up. So that's kind of where we come in is that we can build those integrations based on these new technologies and their APIs that allow an SI or an end user customer to take advantage of these new techs that are coming on the market very rapidly.
Yep.
And it doesn't require them to have to write a whole bunch of new custom code. Doesn't require actually an effort on their part whatsoever. And it may turn out to be complementary to other things they've already built.
Right. And you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'd love to break it down. When you hear the word tech agnostic, um, what does that really mean in this context?
So tech agnostic comes in a couple of forms, at least from the chair that I sit in. Um, One is we'll take anybody's API on. There's no favorites. It doesn't matter if you have an API. We're happy to build a soft bot so that you can deploy your technology more often. Um, Also, we're agnostic from the perspective that we don't resell anybody's technology. So we're a pure play provider at this point of integrations. So we're not taking on the robotic sale, which means that we're not pitting robot company A against robot company B. Competition's a great thing, but we're going to leave that to the OEMs and the providers and have full faith and confidence that they're going to, show the customer what the value propositions are for their tech, and the customer is going to make the decision on what works best for them. But the other part about being tech agnostic is back to a question you asked earlier about making changes. We don't require someone to make changes to their API. So whatever communication method they've selected, we will absorb that and build the soft bot from it. So it doesn't matter to us if they're using, FTP, TCP/IP, RabbitMQ, their communication methodology doesn't matter. Will take all of them on.
And how does that work as their technology evolves and their API, inevitably changes in some way?
Yep, they're just like customers' needs change, those technologies are
Right.
gonna those APIs are gonna change to meet those
Right.
needs, which is a good thing. That's a little bit of a testament to the benefit of the platform that SVT provides is that for the companies that truly are partnering with us, we offer something called a certified softbot. So that certified softbot enables them to fully collaborate with SVT, share mutual roadmaps, which means that we can keep their API up to date. And so customers that are on our platform get this, that new functionality offered to them at no additional or incremental cost. So when that softbot is tweaked to account for new bells and whistles that an OEM put into their API, then that becomes available to anybody who subscribes to our platform.
And could you speak to how that differs from the traditional approach to integrating automation solutions and how that impacts like the changes, right? Because traditionally, if you have a change, like you have to manage you have to like maintain your integration, right? But then if something changes, that's a whole potentially new set of work, right?
Yeah, it's exactly right. So if someone puts in a system and it has multiple facets to it, um, all that effectively gets hard coded for that specific system. So if there's 3 or 4 technologies involved in the delivery, if any one of those elements changes for any reason, a lot of additional code has to be written to account for it. And that could be adding something, taking something away, or one of those 4 pieces of technology in and of itself had a change in functionality. Either way, that requires more code to be written. I think the other challenge is that whether whoever writes the custom code, change is inevitable. And it's not just technology change or business change, it's personnel change. Someone on your team gets promoted, which is a great thing, and they go on to a new role. Well, maybe the code they wrote wasn't fully documented, and it's not always a great situation when people leave either. And so then the problem becomes they've left and once again still don't have things well documented. So now we have a full blown custom integration reliant on someone who's no longer here that no one understands, how to tweak that code. So a system like SVT helps solve some of those issues just based on the platform that we've built and the fact that our system is self documenting so that when that person does get promoted, the organization can have full faith and confidence that they're going to continue to use the automations they had before without any slowdown or worst case scenario, any stoppage to what they were doing.
Great. And I wonder if this next question kind of plays into that quite a bit. But what does the pricing model look like for the
The
platform?
Yeah, so SVT's got a usage-based pricing model, which I believe is both unique as well as unique in that it's a fair way to go about it. Um, so that in some respects, you're going to pay for what you use, um, which might be unique in the market. But how it differentiates itself also, besides the usage base, is that it is an annual license fee. So I think people are accustomed to paying one time for an integration. So then when they come up against an opportunity to use someone like SVT and they're like, oh, why would I license this for more than 1 year? I only pay one time for an integration. I think in some cases they haven't taken into account all the costs involved in that one time integration. So not only do they pay the one time fee, probably they're paying some level of support on top of that. And then, as you've already brought up, as changes occur, new code's going to have to be written altogether or at least tweaked. Another 6 months and dollars applied to that. So I think what people will find is through our model, um, a multi-year license oftentimes still is less cost than a one-time integration fee when you take everything into account. And then on the benefit side, as I said, it's fully documented, less burdensome on your IT and operations staff. And then there's just the whole speed to market element. Generally, it's, you know, 5 to 10 times faster than a typical integration.
Yeah, it's substantial. Could you give me some examples of where, SVT has come in maybe after a tech has been selected and maybe they're even in like mid integration process trying to deploy, I'm sure up against this, an aggressive deadline and we've kind of come in and helped resolve that. Versus I'm assuming we come in at different points in the process and are totally part of that integration plan, but other times when people maybe didn't even know we existed, right? And they're going down the traditional route. and how we maybe come in and resolve some of those pain points.
Yeah, so SVT is happy to come in and help people solve problems at any point in their journey. There are times when it's less favorable from our perspective because of the work required, but that's okay. We deal with that. But I think what you're really getting at there is a few things occur. So earlier we talked about someone goes to a trade show, they get enamored with the technology. Inevitably, they push that through the organization. Maybe the organization wasn't ready to integrate it. The other thing our opportunity where we get brought in is maybe everyone did take into consideration what needed to happen. And it was an organization that really was focused on doing it themselves. And then once they entered into the work, this is the first time they've had to integrate an OEM's API into their stack. And maybe no one told them that was a 1,200-page API document. And maybe no one pointed them to what the most critical parts of that API document were. And then other work happens. As I mentioned, I think earlier on in the podcast, um, people have day jobs, keeping the current operation running. And so maybe they didn't fully figure out the time necessary to go build this integration. So we get called in oftentimes on those where a customer tried to build it themselves, realized there was just way too much effort involved. Um, and then we've had some cases too where a company may have been selected to help build the integration, but it's very possible that one of the things they were building to was new to them. Could have been a custom host system, or it could have been a robotic technology that they weren't familiar with. So they had done similar things, maybe presumed this one was going to be like the ones they had done in their past, and turned out to not be the case. Um, Seems like all of those things pile on top of each other so that we end up getting a phone call 9 to 12 weeks before peak. Someone already has robots on the ground. They've made any number of efforts to get them up and running to no avail. And then we get called in, and we've actually had success in that exact scenario a couple of different times. But th- that's all doable. But as I might have mentioned before, the preference would be that the OEMs involved and the customer involved have these discussions up front. Everybody's aware of what the effort's going to be, whether they're a do-it-yourselfer or willing to buy from the outside. But we're happy to be brought in and have those discussions, show people, what it would be like if they were to utilize SVT.
So I know, final question. I know you are in a lot of conversations with, large retailers, 3PLs and um partners, right? Other OEMs.
Mhm.
What surprises people the most in those conversations?
Well, there's a lot of elements that surprise people, I think. So I think time surprises people. Um, I think cost surprises people. And then I'll also say that the thing that I think surprises people about SVT, because I hear this quite often, um, is that it doesn't seem believable that we do what we do, build a repeatable process that takes 12 weeks or less. That's the thing that often surprises people is that, how is that possible? And I had the opportunity to work on a technology for about 8 years of my career. And it's interesting because I use it, I weigh up against your question about what surprises people to help address it. So that technology, we told the public that it always had an ROI payback of 6 months or less. And the reality is the ROI payback was typically significantly better than 6 months. The reason we used the 6-month number was that was the believable number. Anything less than 6 months wasn't believable, even though that was almost always the case. And I find that to be the case with SVT as well. We tell people that we can do typical integrations in 12 weeks or less, which is absolutely the case. Um, but if it's technology that we've deployed before, host system that we've deployed before, robotic system we've deployed before, typically it's significantly less. But we try to stick with the 12-week number because that's the believable number. But I think even that's, the surprise to people.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jay. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me on today.